God, Leon's story is incredible, right?
I was playing a computer game. All of a sudden, colors start to change and your mood kind of changes.
Guys, stick with us because we're going to dive deep.
And then I get up and I walk into my living room, and then it's concept of Earth and like civilization, society, that kind of fades away.
I just purchased, just this second, 50,000 shares of MMEDF.
It's called the Ego Death. It was the most profound moment of my entire life.
And I'm actually going to purchase another 20,000 shares.
Felt like I got 1,000 years of experience in what was actually like 6 hours.
We could be entering a revolutionary new phase in how mental health is treated in this country, using drugs that have long been illegal and viewed as dangerous. Psychedelics, chemical compounds like LSD, MDMA, DMT, Psilocybin, the chemical in magic mushrooms, and the research looks promising for the potential of psychedelic-inspired medicines to treat a vast range of issues from depression to addiction. We're already seeing public attitudes start to shift, regulatory agencies opening up to research, and neuroscience tools that are way more sophisticated than they were when these drugs were simply labeled as dangerous and useless. Johns Hopkins University launched a dedicated center for psychedelic studies, the first of its kind in the US, perhaps the largest in the world. Investors are looking to cash in on promising early results in what could be a brand new industry competing against the traditional big pharma drug companies from mental health space. These investors are speculating that the new drug treatments will become legalized and commercialized, maybe even as quickly as cannabis did. As investors, we are always looking for the next big thing. So today on Dumb Money, which psychedelic stocks are we buying in anticipation of what could be an unprecedented Shroom boom? You're going to be joined in just a bit by some members of the Dumb Money community who, one works for Psychedelic Society, another has personally been affected by depression and has used psychedelics to treat it. So, Chris, Jordan, this is a big episode for me. Psychedelics, I think, truly became a viable investment earlier this month when both Washington, D.C. and Oregon passed measures. All of the stocks out there are all of these super small startups, and it's really hard to judge, like you're saying. It's hard to judge, is what they're doing real? How big could they become? If there is this widespread adoption, these could be the early companies are going to be the ones that win, or maybe big pharma gets involved. But anyway, do you want to bring the guests in?
Yeah, and guys, stick with us because we're going to dive deep in the latter half of this episode after our guests speak about the actual trades that we have already made and are contemplating making, the risk, the reward. Remember, we're not financial advisors. We're not telling you what to do, but we're going to tell you how we're interpreting the data sets and the research and what we're trading based on this whole shroom boom. And then you make your own decisions, guys. We don't know your risk tolerance. We don't know, we're not financial advisors. Okay, let's make that very clear. But let's do it. Let's bring on one of our favorites.
We're going to bring on both Alex and Leon. Alex works for the Psychedelic Society. He raises money for MAPS, which is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. And Leon is one of our lead moderators on the Discord channel over at dumbmoney.tv/Discord. He worked at our last startup company, Ticker Tags. He's been public about his struggle with depression. Today he's going to talk about his experience treating his condition with psychedelic drugs, including what's called a heroic dose. A heroic dose, which is more than therapeutic or recreational.
Most of my 20s, I was struggling from depression. It was mostly from like childhood trauma and stuff like that happened. And I was on everything. I was on Zoloft, I was on Lexapro and Wellbutrin, all that. And there was a low point in my life in 2011. Divorced in 2010, that didn't go well. I was with the wrong person in 2011, and basically I almost died in Vancouver. Basically, it was a drug interaction kind of thing, and those was the bottom of my life then, 2011. And then I came back to Texas, and met up with an old gaming buddy of mine, Andrew. I think he's on the chat. What's up, Andrew? So we were roommates for a bit, and he had like this hippie dad, and it was like that late summer that year or early in the fall. He made a shroom tea. So a heroic dose is basically 5 grams, and that's a term that was coined by Terence McKenna, who kind of discovered wrote just a lot of work in shroom research. But anyways, it's Yeah, so we took the tea. I didn't really know what to expect. I was playing a computer game. All of a sudden, colors start to change and your mood kind of changes. And then I get up and I walk into my living room, and then uh, there are crazy lights everywhere. And it's a really long story, but I'll try to cut to the important pieces because to me, I felt like I got 1,000 years of experience in what was actually like 6 hours. So, and you're overwhelmed with these emotions of love-based emotions, and I sat down, and if I closed my eyes, I would see these indescribable patterns and geometric patterns and animating in ways that you can't even imagine. And so it was a lot of that. And there's some stuff that I saw that happened, like visions, I guess, in my living room of like art that was getting written out in gold letters, and a lot of my tattoos, like all like kind of tell that story. But there's a lot of that, a lot of like seeing like different past lives even and stuff like that. But there's this epic point, or this high point where it's called the ego death. And for some people it can be scary because you think you're dying, but you're not actually dying. No one's ever died from shrooms. And what happens is your sense of self, your framework of what puts together, me, Leon, I'm a human male on Earth, that kind of like starts fading away, and then the concept of Earth and like civilization, society, that kind of fades away. And I remember recall seeing like this beautiful like sun kind of vision, and indescribable rays of light that was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I've told others that I felt like it was the most profound moment in my entire life. It felt like a religious experience. I mean, I grew up Christian, became atheist, and all of a sudden it's like, this is like a religious experience. And you're overwhelmed with like love and this feeling of understanding. And you're not in this, you're in a different dimension is how I've described it too. It's like you're in this different world with different physics and different, it's nothing like the hard Newtonian world like we're in. And I'm overwhelmed with this feeling of love. And also I had this sense that, wow, like I feel like I've been here 1,000 times before. Like, why can't I remember? And then, so let me go back a little bit. So this framework of who I am goes away, the personality goes away. What is left is this pure awareness. Awareness is able to feel emotion, but that's it. And as I look back, that awareness could be in my dog, could be in you, Chris, my mom, like literally that's how transient this awareness, as I've described it, could be. So it's really like, yeah, it changed my kind of thinking on things in a spiritual and philosophical way. And then after that, I saw a lot of stuff that you would see in an Alex Gray painting, animated. And and there's times where like, then you start coming down a little bit and you're able to get up and talk to your whoever's around. Setting matters, right? You want to be in a comfortable place with people you trust. And then you close your eyes and you go back into seeing these visuals and whatnot. And I felt covered in this warmth of love and understanding. I wanted to call my mom and tell her I love her. And I was hearing like cats from a distance, and I felt love for all the animals around me, all my neighbors around me. And yeah, like ever since then, like I've never been on antidepressants. I've been on this like level up in life quest. I've been on, doing everything from, getting into yoga, jujitsu, powerlifting, following like all the motivators I could find, and now I'm here where I am, like way better than where I was.
Which is great.
Thank you, Leon, and we might come back to you. But Eric, I think, let me ask you, because for someone that hasn't been through this experience, I think for a lot of us, our minds go to, well, that's risky, and scary, and I've heard about good and bad experiences. You're worried about the bad experience, and like, I don't know if I would want to put myself through that, right? And can you talk a little bit about the bad side of this, the risk factors? I know, Leon, you said no one's ever died from it. I don't know, maybe that's true, but can you talk about that piece of it?
Yeah, so it's a little hard since there's such a variety of substances. So I'm guessing we're probably want to focus more on psilocybin since that's the
Yes.
more common one. So with that, I don't ever really see too many people having a bad trip or a bad time. But like Leon mentioned earlier, it's all about set and setting. So if you're struggling with like really bad depression, you shouldn't throw yourself into a setting that has things that might, remind you of something bad that happened or something that might just make you super overwhelmed. And that's kind of why we have this sanctuary, as we call it, in these settings. So if you ever start to have experience a bad trip, you have somewhere to go with people that are sober to kind of help walk you through that bad experience, to hopefully after you work through that bad experience, most people, whatever that bad experience was, maybe it was like something, depression or anxiety that they were experiencing at that time, usually after they work through that bad trip, as we would call it, they usually have a such better experience and outlook on that when they look back after that high or that trip is over 6 hours later. When they look back or think back about that experience, it's almost like it never happened. And most of them are so glad they come back the next day. They're like, "Oh, I'm so glad you helped me work through this experience. I have a complete new outlook on how I'm looking at that XYZ thing that happened to me or caused that situation."
So how many, let me ask you, how many people have you kind of been with through this process, Alex? Like, have you experienced this with a dozen people, 100 people? Like, what is the universe of experience here, that in terms of quantity, that you've seen personally?
Are you saying what we'd consider like a bad trip, or are you just saying
No, just in general.
In general,
taking from A to Z through this process, right? Like,
I would say easily over thousands.
easily over
Yeah.
1,000. And well, I mean, I think I mean, what you're doing is pretty admirable. I think it's really cool. But getting back to like your personal experience, having witnessed up to 1,000 people or more go through this, and I don't know how many of those people you have ongoing relationships with after the event, but I've seen data showing that there's a 500% increase of hallucinations after taking, one of these doses, right? Is that, but when that data is presented, it doesn't necessarily say, is that good? Is that bad? Like, how bad is it if it is bad? Like, I'm trying to figure out, what are people not saying coming out of these studies, right? Like, what are the risk factors? Because as an investor, and if we're trying to figure out, should we be investing in this movement for clinical anxiety and depression and drug recovery, like, all of these things are going to come out over the next 3 years, okay? Like, all the side effects are going to come out. Like, they will come out because they're being monitored so closely and so clinically that as a social arb investor, my goal is to kind of, figure out what those side effects are going to be, because there's such a vast amount of experiences with this drug over the last 30, 40 years that we should be able to adequately predict or just know exactly what side effects are going to come from taking this, right? So can you tell us what the risk factors are? Like, when people say 500% more hallucinations afterwards, like once you're through the trip, in the months afterwards, like, what does that actually mean? Is that a negative? Will that come out as a dangerous thing, a negative thing? Can they hurt themselves afterwards? Do they kind of be super as transparent as you can with us?
Yep. I think Alex has a thing on this, but I think what they're talking to, so there is a risk factor, and that's with people with a gene or family history of schizophrenia. They should not take psychedelics because they're going to get schizophrenia anyways. But what psychedelics will do is most likely speed it up. So that's probably what they're talking about with people seeing hallucinations afterwards. In my experience, everyone just, you feel more love. I mean, that's a basic experience. But yeah, and I think everyone should try it, except for people who have schizophrenia.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think Leon hit that right on the head. I know one person personally who ended up kind of getting schizophrenia after a long period of drug usage. I'm not sure if that's because the psychedelics played a part or if they were just prone to schizophrenia in general. But for the most, from what I've seen some people, yes, they come off a bad trip and have, may have lost friendships or changed relationships. I'm not sure if it's for the better or worse, but for the most part, everyone I see come out of those type of trips is all for mainly for the better. They're happy that they had that bad experience to get there. I've personally never had any hallucinations or anything like that outside or after taking drugs. I remember like taking DARE class. They would tell you you take LSD once, you crack your back, you're gonna see hallucinations again and stuff like that. But I've never personally had anything like that besides being in a sensory deprivation tank that made me hallucinate. But that's common for using those type of things.
Now, as far as like turning this into something that is prescribed, though, I think that's something that would be disclosed, right? And so you'd have to say, even if you're not really concerned about recurring hallucinations, but that, illusions and hallucinations are a side effect of the drug, because when you take it, that's what happens, right? And so even though that's kind of the purpose of it, it's also, like a doctor couldn't just, be like, oh yeah, you're gonna have some fun, see some crazy colors. Like he's gonna have to talk about it pretty clinically.
Yeah, I know if at least. Go ahead.
I was just say I was looking at the therapeutic doses on Compass's website, and they were really low. Like it wasn't even a gram. It was like a several 70. It was almost like a microdose. And if you take a microdose, you're not going to see any hallucinations, but you're going to get like the warm, fuzzy kind of feelings, but without.
It's going to laugh for a little bit.
Yeah, especially with microdoses, that's actually seen a lot of hype in Silicon Valley. A lot of those big tech people have talked about how they use microdosing to be more creative and to feel they have more energy and just that, more competitive edge because they just have that little sense of creativity.
But yeah, I mean, let's be honest, guys. If I took what you're saying as a microdose, it would not be a nothing event for me. Just see that. I can guarantee you that I would come out with like 40 different side effects that I would tell you I was having from it, okay? Now it's time for us to dig in deep to the research, talk about the stock trades, but we're going to let you guys go. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Really appreciate it, guys. I was really looking forward to hearing about that, and God, Leon's story is incredible, right? Like, it's absolutely incredible. I think we should talk about just how big the market is for this before we get too into it, like depression stats.
So basically major depression is somewhere between 10 and 15% of the entire population, right? And now while this drug is only being targeted for the people that are treatment resistant, that's still a third, so that's up to 5% of the population. But we have to assume that if this is, effective for people that are treatment resistant, why wouldn't they start to creep into, further up the pipeline to try to get people off some of these tough drugs?
Yeah, Jordan, I heard that from a dollar standpoint, what that means for people that are treatment resistant is like 3 to 5 billion globally in terms of how much they're spending on pharma for that treatment resistant ailment, and about 1 billion to 1.5 billion a year here in the US, right? So like just with that treatment resistant group, it's already like 1 billion to 1.5 billion annually here in the US. I feel like when you start I was really excited about this movement and the investments in this space, but the more you end up researching and digging in deep, this is something that requires a lot of people time, right? Like the Compass is like the big one. What's the stock symbol for Compass, Jordan?
So yeah, it's CMPS. So let's talk about Compass. And so you said it takes people, and it doesn't just take people, right? So basically this drug has to be administered, in a clinical setting. So you can't just prescribe it and let the person go home with it. Like they're not going to do that. And so you have to take it in that clinical setting, but it's not just a clinical setting. All the people that are around you, you have to have registered healthcare professionals. So you can't just be like a psychiatrist. It has to be a registered healthcare professional that also has taken training in psychotherapy.
is
Compass
kind of the key.
is kind of the biggest.
Compass is the biggest. They're NASDAQ. They're a NASDAQ company. They're not like NASDAQ 100 or anything, but they're a NASDAQ listed company. I think most of the rest of them are pink sheets.
They are. And Compass is actually the first $1 billion thing. They're the first psychedelic unicorn, is what I found out.
So Dave, they doubled since their IPO. So they've doubled in valuation on their, I guess it was on their IPO day. So, people are saying, there's a lot of hype with Compass. And the reality is Compass is going through their phase 2 trial right now. I think they'll be completely done with phase 2 by the end of 2021. They're set to potentially, if everything goes right, this is a company that will have this treatment fully approved by the FDA sometime in 2023 or maybe even 2024. So, gosh, but guys, here's the problem. It's a one-trick pony, this company. Could you imagine if the trial has to be stopped, okay, for any number of reasons, and we know how easy it is to have to stop a trial? Gosh, I mean, there's no backup plan here. This is a risky, for anyone looking to invest in this, including myself, because I did buy shares. I already have shares of Compass.
Well, you're up 4% today.
Well, and look, Chris, you got to realize, traded a lot of these biomeds, probably a decade ago, and did really well in them. But they are very volatile based on what the FDA reports back, during some of these trials. And so if there's any hiccup in the trials, you can see the share price plummet.
Mind Medicine, which is kind of one of the smaller ones, but I would say at least the market perceives Mind Medicine to be one of the more legitimate small players. They're about $500 million valuation, I think. Is that right, guys?
And
400 or 500 million. Let me just take people through. Understand
380 million as of today's 9% increase.
Crazy. Compass is focused on clinical depression, drug-resistant depression, and just clinical depression in general. Where the stock we're talking about right now, Mind Medicine, which is MMEDF, they are more focused on, correct me if I'm wrong, anxiety. What else, guys? It's 3 things. Anxiety, I think drug rehabilitation, I think potentially. But anxiety and ADD, anxiety and ADD. So in my mind, I'm like, I could see the FDA being a bit more focused on treating an ailment like clinical depression than ADD and anxiety. But, the anxiety, I mean, this is a lot to go through for ADD, right, guys? Anxiety is a whole nother thing. Anxiety could be pretty serious. But I don't know if the FDA will view that as something that they want to fast track, because they're fast tracking or give like fast track status to Compass. And I know that Mind Medicine is going to try to get that same fast track status. And if they do, that would be a huge boom for the stock, I would imagine. I just purchased, just this second, 20 seconds ago, I purchased 50,000 shares of MMEDF. I did not own any prior to this episode, but I own some now. And I'm actually going to purchase another $20,000 right now. So or 20,000 shares, excuse me. So I now own, I didn't get filled. I should always do this before. I feel guilty doing it before the episode.
That's fine. It's on a downtrend. You should be able to get filled.
Okay. So I have 70,000 shares now of MMDEF. And Jordan, you know that I've owned for a little while now. I've owned Compass. Let me see how much Compass I actually own here. Here I have 10,000 shares. I have a lot of Compass, guys. Wow.
I love how you go through your portfolio and are just constantly shocked and amazed at what you bought. It's like, what did I do that?
$70,000 worth of Compass.
I'm selling 5,000 shares right now. I'm selling. There's 2. Now that I have the other one, I don't want to own that much. I think that's a little ridiculous. So whatever. I'm going to put an order in. We'll see if it gets filled to sell some. So guys, I think we've said all there is to say about mushrooms. I have my trade on. It's a little bit of a set it and forget it trade for me because this isn't a social arb trade that's going to change next month. Now, if trial data comes out and it's terrible, I'm screwed. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I'm screwed, and I probably lost 50% of my investment, if not more. maybe 70%, right? If something bad happens. That's just something I'm going to have to live with. But $350,000 portfolio, I can live with that.